Hello, welcome to Happily Handmade. I'm Wendy and today something new has arrived that I thought I'll open them with you and show them to you as we go. Yeah, it's a bit of a blind purchase this, so as you can see from Art from the Heart in the UK, but it is the new Distress watercolour crayons, crayons. I've got crayons on the brain today. Let me get rid of the packaging. So yeah, I have got the 3 new watercolour pencils from Tim Holtz and the Distress line. Yeah, just curious to see what they're like, how they'll work with what I've got already. Yeah, a few thoughts about it already really. I've bought these obviously in the UK from Art from the Heart. These were just shy of £70, so basically it's cost that for a 36 set because there's 12 in each of these lovely tins. I think price is the one thing that's maybe going to be the issue with these. I'm not sure. I suppose it ultimately depends on how much you love the Distress line and how much you're prepared to pay for it, on whether this is probably a product for you. For going on £70 for a 36 set, that's pretty expensive in watercolour pencil terms. They are as it says, a woodless, water reactive, highly pigmented pencil. So it's solid pigment. Very much like Neocolour 2, or there are a few others out there along the same lines, aren't there? But Neocolour obviously is a crayon, so it's softer. These I'm expecting to be firmer, more like a pencil than the Neocolours, but bearing in mind there's only 36 of these. You know, that's quite an expensive price point, considering I can get, you know, the full, is there 80 of these? I can't remember. I've had these a little bit of time now, but obviously these are smaller in that they're a shorter crayon, but there's a lot of colours in these. I've not worked out per pencil. Maybe I'll have a look before I put this up and try and work it out per pencil, but I think these look expensive compared to some of the alternates that I have. Ooh, can I balance that? Yes. The only other colouring item that I think they did before was these, which I think I have a few more in my drawer, but I don't have a huge set of these. I don't think they make these anymore, do they? But they're Distress markers. Because I was a card maker before, these are just a simple brush on one end. I think it's like a plastic nib on the other. Yeah, like a fine line of plastic nib on the other. Obviously the advantage of these was, I was thinking at the time, you know, if the ink starts to run out of these, I'm sure it's not going to be the easiest, but surely I could just get some Bond or ink refillers and refill these, couldn't I? So I think 1 or 2 of these are a little bit dry now, because obviously these are not a new product, but that's probably the closest they had before to this kind of line. They're all in the way now. Let me get rid of them. I can go back in the drawer for now. So yeah, I'm quite excited to see these. I'm going to crack one open because I'm doing a lot of talking and not much looking at what they're like. And my postie delivered these earlier and I had to go and walk the dog. So I was like, no, you cannot play with them. Go and walk the dog. That's the job. So as you can see, when you take the wrapper off, you've got a clear, or it's like an acetate plastic, but it keeps the back stickers on with the colours on and all the info. Then, oh, they're completely separate. So once I've get rid of that, reflective. Oh, we've got more plastic. So then we've got another, is that out of the lid? Oh no. Got another little piece of plastic. How does that come out? Oh yeah, it just pops out. So palette. That's what that's going to be. That's its life. And then yeah, what do each of these look like? So it's just some kind of printed coating on it with the name on, and then that's it. Yeah, so you just got Distress watercolour pencil. You've got this kind of wood looking printed surface and then the printed name on it, and they're sharpened to a kind of flat end on the end. I so want to know what they feel like to work with. Oh, they're softer than I thought they'd be. I thought they'd be pretty hard. But yeah, they're fairly soft. These don't have any wax in. I did listen to Tim demoing them and he said they were waxless, but they don't feel completely waxless. Obviously they are if he said it. I'm sure he knows. Just wondering how they'll overlay with each other. Not that these are ideal colours to do this, but as there's two. Yeah, what do I think? This is quite a textured pad that I've got next to me, but certainly I'm curious to have a play with these to see how they dissolve. Yeah, they don't dissolve badly. Yeah, that's not too bad. I think they're red. Is it? I don't think it is Barn Door, that one, is it? Let me have a look what it is. Ooh. Oh, it's more orange. Oh, it is Barn Door. Good guess, Wendy. Yeah, it's dissolved okay. This obviously isn't watercolour paper in this pad, so perhaps not the fairest of choice, but yes, so the 3 sets you've got in each set, obviously a different set of the Distress ink line. So this is set 2 with all of these ones in. Then I've got set 3 with all of these ones in. Bit more muted palette, that one. And then I've got set 1 that has a little bit of everything in. So together they look like that in terms of palette. Excuse my light reflecting on the plastic. So yeah, it's quite an interesting colour palette, I think. They are obviously much shorter than a normal pencil. I think that's the first obvious thing. I happen to have my whole bands because I was using them for something else. So compared to a normal pencil, they are obviously significantly shorter. Mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, obviously, yeah, they're a bit smaller, so they'll be easier to take to places. Obviously that does eat into the value of them as well, but a neo colour is much shorter than this. Again, if I just got one out, where's my other tin? These are not neo 2s, but they'll be the same size, and I won't have used these very much, so they'll be the exact size that they are. So if I get a neo, well in this case it's 1, but you can kind of see how much bigger they are than a neo. Yeah, they're quite an interesting product, aren't they? I'm curious to see how they work when I swatch them. Obviously the distress line, this product is designed to work with all of the other distress products, so the colour palette will match pretty much what you have in terms of ink. I don't have all the distress inks myself, so there are colours in here that I don't have in my inks already. I have quite a lot of inks, but not certainly not all the distress line inks. I think there comes a point where you've got kind of enough colours that, oh, these are tricky to get out. Let's get that last shiny thing out. Ooh, there we go. Okay, so they're all free of plastic. Yeah, I quite like these tins. I think these are quite handy. I don't know if I'll keep them in the tins to use them every day, but if you just wanted to take them somewhere, they were good, quite safe. They're fairly contained in their little plastic seating that's in there. and obviously it's a tin, so it's fairly long lasting, quite nice, kept on a shelf. My other watercolour pencils, generally, apart from my Inktense, they're still in the tin. What else? My Neos, they live in their tins, as you've just seen, but everything else lives in this one. That's one of these zippered things. So I have Albert Duras, I have some Derwent's, Derwent watercolours, Derwent solid, I can't remember what these are called, the Aquatones, I think they're called Aquatones, which is probably a very similar product, but obviously this is a full normal pencil size, but it's the same kind of thing in that it's a solid watercolour lead just in a plastic wrap that you can sharpen, so it's very comparable really in the style of them. Might be interested to see how these compare together. These are okay, but they're not something that Derwent make anymore, so there is no competition there unless you're old like me, and I've still hoarded them for quite a while. So I've done a swatch sheet for them already, just on the computer. I've labelled them already, so I'm interested to see just how they start to behave. She says nearly tipping them over herself. This is the only trouble with this. I'm too clumsy to do these things. Yeah, interested to see how they behave when you've actually got them on a swatch sheet. So I want set 3 to start off with, which is the reason I'm putting the lids back on. That one. Hurrah! That one. So let's move those ones apart. Move that plastic as well, because that's annoying. And I'm going to give it a go with these. So they should be pretty okay to work with because they've got their names on, so hopefully that will make it a bit easier. I've got a little water brush prepped ready. So this is a where is that little sheet? Faber-Castell. Oh, didn't want to knock them over. Oops. Faber-Castell watercolour pads. It's a cheaper one. I think it's the kind of student grade. If you overfill it, it will kind of start to warp a little bit, but it's generally what I swatch on, and it's good enough for a watercolour swatch. I'm going to go about halfway, I think. I'm not sure what I think about the lay down of these. They're I suppose I'm used to my Albert Duras, and maybe that's a unfair comparison, not sure. But yeah, they don't feel at the moment quite as nice as those to lay down on this paper. Maybe on something a bit smoother they might be a little bit different. Maybe on a little bit more water. Dissolve quite well so far. I'm going to dissolve most of it but leave a little bit towards the end so you can see the original. Or shall I? No, I'm going to dissolve the whole lot. I think what I'll do is I'll do the little rubber on the end in the original colour is what I'll do. I've not sharpened these before I've started to do this, so I shouldn't think on a woodless pencil it should make much difference other than not having a sharp end on it. They do have a little bit of crumbliness to them, but that one's dissolved pretty well, I think, for a first go. There's not too much of the mark left where it started. Let's get the next one out. So we've got Candied Apple. See what the darker one's like, how well that dissolves on this paper. I'm going to put quite a heavy amount down. So I'll see how much of the colour we're left with. But yeah, for a watercolour pencil it feels fairly soft underneath. It's not too hard a surface. That one's dissolved nicely. It helps if you stay in the lines, that would be helpful. Clumsy. Yeah. So yeah, so far I quite like them, I think. Dissolving quite nicely, and I think that's the main thing. It's nothing worse than a watercolour pencil where you've put it on intending to dissolve it, and then it's leaving those little marks on. It doesn't seem to be doing that, so that's my biggest relief, really. Obviously these are ideal if you've got maybe a piece of work that you're working on and you've used the inks in it and you just want something to match but that's in your drawing maybe. That might be really useful. You can sharpen these properly so you can get a really fine point to them. I do that with my Neo 2s quite often because I do use them dry and wet, my Neos. So I'll be interested to see how these fit in with my Neos. These, because they're waxless, shouldn't build up on the paper too badly. So yeah, I think they could be quite a useful product. That one, as it starts to dry, is a little bit more streaky as it's dried, but it didn't look streaky wet. So, unsurprisingly, I'm going to swatch them all now just to see what they are actually like, and then I'll come back to you with my thoughts. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much a swatch of the first 36 of the Distress watercolour, solid watercolour pencils. What do I think? Well, I mean, it's early days, isn't it? This is just on one paper, so difficult to make any honest, kind of realistic judgment about them just on this one paper, because like I say, this isn't top quality paper. It's just the paper I tend to do my swatches on, because it goes through the printer. Simply, it's that simple for me. Yeah, I quite like them. Vintage Photo obviously is an ink pad I've used a lot over many years. Not quite sure how colour matching that is for me. I suppose it's maybe if I'd watered it out a little bit more, if I had a bit more space, maybe you could get more of those tones. I don't think they're exact matches. I think that's what I feel. Particularly Kitsch Flamingo, I think is normally in the ink pad a bit stronger than that. It really did blend out to, when you wet the Kitsch Flamingo, it seemed to pretty much vanish under your brush, really. It went really quite thin, and I think that seems to be the way with a few of the lighter ones. Antique Linen, Tumbled Glass felt a little bit harder to manage once it was dissolved. It seemed to really fade away, but that could be this paper. I really love Villainous Potion on this, Prize Ribbon. The strong colours, they really work well, and I think the ones that work well are the stronger of the pigments in the line. Certainly if you love your Tim Holtz Distress ink pads and you want something to do small details with on something that you've already used some of those ink pads and you want it to be close, these are obviously ideal for that. I think they're quite nice to use because they're a solid pencil rather than one with wood. Obviously you are getting a lot of pigment for the money in one of these. They should last quite a long time if you're not too fussed about sharpening them, and there's where the issue is for me, really. I do tend to keep mine sharp. I'm using them in a colouring book more than often, so I want to get into detail. For today's, I've left them as they were, but honestly for me, unless you were using them for a background, I would probably use my pencil sharpener with them. Obviously you can collect that waste, you can still use that waste as a watercolour if you're organised enough of a person to do that. Not sure I am. So there is value in them in that respect. I think the problem for this product for me is really when you compare them to other watercolours on the market. I just had a quick look, and obviously I'm looking at UK prices, but 40 pack of the Neo 2s are 53, cheaper than what I've paid for this. 36 pack of the Albrecht Dürer pencils, £45, again a good 20 quid cheaper than this. Both of those are excellent products, and this line is obviously in direct competition with both of those products. Would I pick these over either of those two? It's a difficult question to answer. I think both the Albrecht Dürer are beautiful pencils, but they are a pencil. You're not getting as much pigment in them. Overall, these should last longer. But Neos, they're a little bit shorter, but you are getting more for £53 and it's cheaper. So I don't know. I think ultimately, whether this is a product for you depends on whether you like the distressed palette and whether you love using the inks and you want a pencil that matches the inks you've used, and then these make perfect sense regardless of the price. This currently is the full set that they offer. Hopefully they'll be adding more to them. I like the colours that are in here. You can do quite a lot with them, I think. I think until I try and use them on a page, you don't really realise what's missing so much. You've got obviously quite a lot of beautiful blues. Greens, I'm not sure there's a great kind of natural green. Peel paint's quite nice. It washes out quite nice to a quite grassy green, but there's not a kind of richer green, a proper grass green in this palette. So I think there are holes in this set. I think it'd be tricky to use just these and not bring other things into it, but that's not how I'm going to use them. I will use them with all the other things that I've got. I do like them. I think if I keep them blunt like this, they'll be quite good for backgrounds. They did dissolve beautifully. There's none, as you can see, that have left the original marks that I made with the pencil. They've all dissolved really nicely, and they've dried really nicely. There's the odd one, like I say, Kitchen Flamingo is much darker, much lighter when washed out. Same with Tattered Rose, same with Tumbled Grass. Really, they seem to be the ones that don't show up quite as much. I was just wondering how they would be on black paper. So this, as you can see, is just a Faber-Castell mixed media, but it's just literally black. So I was wondering how strong they are on top of black, and so fairly opaque. The white, obviously whites, I have a few. Yeah, they allow you to layer to a point, and then it seems to get a bit resisty, but it's not wax, so not sure why that's occurring. Let's see what it's like if it dissolves. Let me just clean that. How opaque it stays dissolved. Reasonably. Stays reasonably opaque. Doesn't just vanish into it, so I think that's pretty good. Let's try one of the others. More of a darker colour. Oh yeah, that shows up quite nicely as well. Not washed my brush, so it's going to get some white on this one, but yeah, so they're working quite nicely onto a dark surface. What else should we try? Try Salvage Patina. Yeah, they work quite nicely over the black, so clearly got some level of reasonable opacity over them. Yeah, so there you go. The new set of Tim Holtz distressed watercolour pencils. They don't really, other than distress palette, they don't really distress in the same way the ink would, but certainly if you want to use them with the ink pads, I think they make perfect sense in that situation. I quite like them. They dissolve quite nicely. I don't think I love them dry. I think that's, but could just be this watercolour paper, so, and the fact I haven't sharpened them, which, like say, normally I would normally sharpen a product like this to get into the little details. So yeah, that's your first look. Hope it's been of interest to you. The lovely distress watercolour pencils by Ranger and Tim Holtz. Bye bye.